And welcome to another episode of the Identity Work Podcast. Adam and I are here, and we are thrilled to be joined by Philip Carson, who is a partner at Cubit Capital, a Dallas-based venture capital firm, and one of the most wise, discerning, thoughtful, kind individuals I know. Philip, you're also probably the biggest Renaissance man we've ever had on the show, with a background including sponge farming, selling Lululemon leggings, operating a gym, being a pro golfer, working in ministry, sushi restaurants, even on your background. So we are excited to have you here. Welcome to the show, Philip.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Honored to be here.
And most importantly, I guess, is your husband, your dad to two beautiful kiddos, avid cyclist, reader, and tinkerer, which I'm not sure what that means, but we'll unpack that a little bit. Unpacked a little bit of your professional background, but we always like to say it's not just what you do, it's who you are. So Philip, tell us a little bit about who you are. How do your wife and friends describe you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Who am I? Well, it starts probably with where I'm from. I think that shapes a lot of who we are. So I grew up in Lexington, Kentucky. I moved to Dallas in 2014. Met my wife in 2016. We've married since 2017. We got two amazing kiddos. And, along that journey, I think work is obviously a big part of that. And my experiences through tons of different jobs has certainly shaped who I am. It's also the people that I've been around who's shaped me. There have been seasons of having very, very bad influences, and thankfully more seasons of having incredible influences, I'd say near miraculous influences on my life to help form me and who I am today.
Love it. Thanks for sharing that. And I think now maybe walk us through, we don't need kind of the full career journey, but as I mentioned, the Renaissance man, you've done so much. Like, how has your career evolved to where it is today? I think Adam and I talk a lot about how career is a journey, not necessarily a destination. I think you've embodied that. Maybe you found your dream job now at Cubit, but just how have, from sponge farming to operating a gym, how is everything to working in ministry to now like venture capital? Talk with us about, just your career journey and how you figured out what you wanted to do.
That is a good question, and I won't pretend that there's a short answer in response. So I'll start from when I was a child. I've got two older brothers, and we played all kinds of sports, pretty active childhood, and around maybe 10 or 12 started mowing the lawn. I remember for our 12th birthday, my mom would give us like a gallon of Tide laundry detergent as our birthday present. It was like, hey, you now do your own laundry. And that was, fun in the moment. And then I think around the same time we started mowing the lawn and would mow the neighbors'
What does your
lawns.
mom give you? I'm just going to interrupt you. What does your mom give you now for your birthday?
That's a good question. We share a birthday, which is really fun. I normally just say, please don't get me anything. She is a naturopath, so I leverage her work quite a bit for my own benefit and health. So I would say I'm quite indebted to her for those services and just her being a great grandmother to our kids. I'm embarrassed. I don't recall what I've received from her.
Okay. I was just like, wow, what a power move to give her kids a gallon of Tide at 12. I love that. So anyways, I interrupt. Keep going.
Yeah. So, but we mowed lawns. I worked on horse farms. As I said, I grew up in Lexington, Kentucky, and a lot of that culture is in the horse industry. So the first job was painting fences, and then mowing grass, mucking stables, and eventually prepping yearlings for 1-year-old racehorses for sale. And I loved that. I really enjoyed that. I was also fascinated with business, entrepreneurship, and very much idolized a founder and the CEO of a company. And I'll just go ahead and fast forward a little bit to this reality that I think a lot of kids grow up in, is that they, well, probably if you grow up in a more affluent environment, and I assume this goes all across the chain, but your baseline for success is your parents. And if you're not as successful or more successful than your parents, then you're a failure. I think at least that's what I observe in certain communities and in, high school, college kids. That's kind of the baseline, which is pretty interesting. I don't know if that's broad application or I just have a very strange, narrow, biased subset of data points there. But growing up, I loved the idea of business, but really part of that was making money. I can't say it was to provide the most value to customers or to solve a really meaningful problem. I think for a long season, I thought the calling on a man's life was to be really successful and very generous. So you make a lot of money so that you could give it away, and then you live a pretty nice lifestyle along the way. There was not a complex or systematic theology informing that. It was just, money seems good. It's a good tool. You should make a lot of it and then bless a lot of people with it, but also get to live a comfortable lifestyle. And then as I came to know the Lord, that shifted in a way that was still one side of it. And then the other side was, or you go be a missionary in closed country or something like that. It's like those two extremes are what you should do in work. Thankfully, I really didn't spend a lot of time chasing either one of those. I really spent time, pursuing what I thought was going to be most enjoyable and meaningful work. But it, as you mentioned, like Renaissance, man, I can't take tons of credit for that. I just happened to go to a place called the Island School on Cape Eleuthera, Bahamas during high school, spring semester of my junior year. And my research project was farming sponges. So farm sponges in the ocean and then offshore in tanks, and tried to mimic the environment to see if we could grow the same quality of sponges in a controlled offshore environment. And then from there, a lot of it was working in restaurants because you need a job, you need to work, you got to, pay for things. And so during school, worked at, sushi restaurant, barbecue restaurant, etc. I did have a really formative season in college where I interned at an options trading education firm. And I loved that. It's technical analysis. I would run historical benchmarks for technical indicators on public equities. And that was such a fun puzzle to me. And the idea of options, at this time, options were kind of new. Nowadays, it's like everyone knows what an option is and they can trade it in their pocket, on their phone, and read some Reddit threads on what options to buy. Back then, it was like this novel, vehicle for investing in, public equities. Really, you're investing in the right to invest in them. But I love public markets and private markets, the idea of investing, entrepreneurship. And as I got older, I did pursue a season in golf where I thought that's what, God was calling me to do. I grew up playing a lot of golf and was really talented in it. I will say I probably peaked in like middle school and then just rode that wave as long as I could, and eventually
You and
turned.
Adam have a lot in common.
Yeah.
Adam definitely peaked
So
in middle school.
turned pro at European Tour Q school, and first round I had the yips on the range, and so uh, that's kind of the worst case scenario for any athlete, is to get the equivalent of yips in whatever domain they have, and that was the beginning of the very quick end for me. I ultimately couldn't pull it together to play competitively enough to make sense of it. And at that point, really desired to go into full-time ministry. And so came back to Dallas, started working out a lot, enjoyed that. That's how I ended up working with a friend around a garage gym. That was incredible. And it was more than a garage gym. I don't know how we got away with it, but we would had 9 classes a week, 35 plus people each week through a residential garage in the middle of Dallas, Texas. And his parents were so gracious. Not one, I mean, we would start at like 5 a.m. and end at 6 p.m. And not once did they complain. They were always happy that people were there, and cars would be parked everywhere, and music blasting. So that was a lot of fun. But in that season, it's like, all right, I want to go into full-time ministry. What's the best option for that? I also needed to work in the meantime. So there was a neat connection between some of the CrossFit gyms in Dallas and Lululemon. And that's how I ended up at Lululemon for, I think, a year. And retail is, wow. I mean, bless anyone who works in retail. It's a challenging environment. It's like, no, this t-shirt is not going to change your life, but yes, you should buy it. Sure. So thankfully, like the mentality at Lululemon is to educate, not to sell. And I really respect that. I do. I think it's brilliant. I think it's wise. So your goal as a retail salesperson, you actually are called an educator. You are just to educate people on the fabric, the article of clothing. But yes, that was, talk about finding, pretty hard to make an idol out of that. I'll just say it. Pretty hard to make an idol out of that. But the Lord did some incredible stuff through that season. And then I eventually got a job at a local church here in Dallas that my wife and I still go to. It's a really large church, Park City's Presbyterian Church. And that season, it was a 2-year residency program. That's when the Lord did what I would say like open heart surgery on my view of the marketplace, and really expanded how I wanted to interact in business. And, for the first time, I realized or understood that like work is a blessing, work is cursed this side of heaven, but work itself is not a curse. And so I think a lot of times we talk about like the sweat of our brow, the toil, the pain. But what we miss is like work is one of the greatest gifts we actually have here on earth. And it's wonderful. There are times where it's incredibly challenging and difficult. And I mean, wow, it's never easy if it's worth doing. But work itself is just unbelievable. And that is one of the primary domains for us to interact with people in the world. And so from there, it was a goal of, all right, how do we go into this redemptive effort through marketplace activities? I am an evangelist, probably a pretty mediocre one at best, but thankfully it's not totally up to me. And for me, business is just an awesome platform to get to know so many people that I otherwise wouldn't be able to get to know, and so that's been a lot of fun, and thankfully brought me back from, instead of the like make as much money as possible and be generous and live a good life, or go be a missionary and take on a poverty based lifestyle in order to prove dignity or honor in that regard. Now it's more of hey, money is a tool and work is a gift. How do we use both to extend God's kingdom and see ourselves truly as just a manager, a custodian, a steward of those resources? It's very freeing to live with that mindset.
Yeah, I agree.
That was much longer than I intended to talk about it.
No, it's good. And I love to press in what you said about work being a gift. I think that's a theme. And also it's hard, especially some of our listeners who are in a difficult season of life. Like, what would you say to someone who's really just struggling in their job now and having a hard time thinking about work as a gift? Is there any words of potential encouragement you could share?
Yes. I think back to the seasons where I worked in jobs that, let's just say that you like, if you work with a recruiter, they're like, hey, you don't need to put that on your resume. Jobs like that where you're just filling a season with work because you've got to pay bills and move forward. I think those are the seasons that can be really challenging, where we've all been, in my opinion, and informed from Scripture, is that we each of us have been uniquely designed with unique attributes, gifts, skills, and the better we can use those gifts and skills, the more joy we will have. Like, each of us have different wirings, and when we do certain things, we receive joy from doing that thing. And there's also the opposite of that, where you do certain things and it's draining of you. And so the goal is to find work that matches up with as many gifts and skill sets as you can that you receive joy from, really irrelevant to the other aspects. It's first find that, and then figure out what's the highest utility for that type of work to be compensated well. And the younger you are, the less likely you're going to find the work where you can really utilize all of your gifts and skills, especially if you have like leadership giftings. Because when you first enter the marketplace, no one's going to put you as CEO or like put you in a leadership position. You got to be at the bottom of the totem pole. And
my dad gave me some good advice, and I was debating on like what my major should be in business school, or this was undergrad, but it's like, I want to be like management. And he's like, I hate to break it to you, but like, no one's going to hire management. You should do finance, because that's at least like a hard skill that people know what to do with, and it was good advice. Even though, my giftings are more towards leadership versus valuing a bond and creating a discounted cash flow. And so, but I had to eat the spinach early on. So anyways, all that to say is I echo with what you're saying.
Yeah. And I'll try to weave these two things together. One is a lunch I had with a dear mentor of mine. I had told him, this is after or near the end of my residency, and we were thinking about, okay, I don't want to stay in full-time ministry. I want to go out in the marketplace, I want to explore, and I think this is what I want to do. And his response, he's a very direct man. He just said, well, it's not something you do, that's something that happens to you. I was like,
interesting.
What? I was like, what? And I reflected on it, and then I've seen it play out. And this might be unique to me. I don't know. Anytime I've tried to like reach out and grab something or force something into fruition, it has ended in futility. It has ended in frustration and, whatever not success is. The most successful things in my life that I've been a participant in, I can take very little credit for, truly. That's not me being modest. That is like, I happened to be in the right place at the right time. God shown favor and equipped me for certain things, and I happened to be there. And if I go into the details of each of those things, it depended on so many exterior like macro events, things far outside any one person's control for it, the opportunity to come to fruition. And so I think that's like would be my encouragement to people working in a capacity that they don't want to be or see themselves in for the long term. Like, it's not necessarily because they've missed something. Like, patience is good. It's hard to steer a parked car, but it's also, patience is rewarding, and to focus on the process, like find joy in framing whatever season you're in, and focus on the process. I've been humbled so many times. I mean, like, it's, I'm hesitant to share because you'd be embarrassed for me. But in those seasons, that's where I think the Lord does so much work and prepares us for much more. But yeah, I think like don't think about the secondary perspectives in those seasons. Just focus on doing what you're doing with excellence, and be patient, but thoughtful, and then at times you're going to need courage, and to go out on a limb and take risk. I think like the risk reward relationship is real, and it's not 100% efficient, but most often the more risk there is, the more potential for reward there is, and it takes a lot of courage to do that. But if you do it for the reward, it's going to be a rough go.
How do you view, I like what you said of like, anytime I've tried to muscle something through, it hasn't really worked. And I feel like from my own experience in corporate America, I felt like I was able to muscle stuff through, but entrepreneurship has been very different. It's like, if I don't send a biz dev email and just sit back, it feels like God will provide the work. I also feel like I can't just sit back. There's need to initiate and be proactive. And so view my role as almost planting seeds and then seeing which ones kind of mature, and then the ones that do mature, doing excellent in that. Is that a fair view, especially as you think about entrepreneurs, and is that aligned to kind of what you were saying of not muscling it something through? And maybe the question is like, how much, there's the proverb of like, look at the ant who labors, and it maybe goes back to how much like initiative and muscling, because I think a lot of our listeners, we're all high achievers. We're used to like being proactive, taking initiative, muscling stuff through. And I do think it's helpful to, begin to do our best and leave the results, hold the results lightly. So I don't know, just some ramblings, but curious to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. As I think about like my comment about muscling things through, it'd be, um, when my friend and I, an incredible guy, we were running this gym, and for us, or at least for me, it was like, okay, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it with excellence. So let's go find a gym location and let's go like build a massive gym and bless a lot of people with being, very fit and physically ready. And so we started to look through different places and just kind of kept hitting a dead end. And then COVID happened. And it's like, all right, well, I guess thankfully we didn't sign a lease at a gym. Like that would have been unfortunate. Uh, but that, like in that season, it would have been futile to have just signed the lease that didn't really feel right. It was always sacrificing too much in order to like force it through. Um, and ultimately it wasn't in the cards for me to continue in that business for the long run. At the same time, I was seeking to I really wanted to raise money and buy an industrial services business and just operate it
Hmm.
for the long run. So um, and I did that before, and then a little bit into business school. And much of why I went to business school was because I thought if the founder operator who was thinking through trusting someone else with their legacy, that if he saw MBA, he'd be able to trust a younger guy a little bit more. And but the reasons we had one business that we were um, working to be under LOI for. This is right around COVID as well. But the like one we never purchased the business. We um, There was a broker involved, and each time we'd get on a call, we'd be talking about numbers, and he would bring up like random numbers. We're like, wait, what are you talking about? Like, hey, just so everyone's aware of, like, this is the number we're talking about, whether it's revenue or a certain revenue in a certain month, and then the broker would just say out some random numbers, and we're like, wait, that's not, it's confusing for a lot of people. Please don't do that. And then eventually the seller just said, hey, we're going to pull this business off market. Like, we can't get through with the transaction right now. And then a year later, I saw that broker had come to know the Lord, and also had become sober. And so during that period, he was, an alcoholic. And I was like, wow, no wonder that you know those conversations were seemingly just never able to be on the same page. But as I thought through it, like that's such a unique, like that's a pretty odd occurrence. But because we thought it was like everything else added up, and I wanted to do this, but ultimately the Lord wasn't calling us to it. And so I think a better way to frame it versus trying to muscle through or reach out and grab it is more of like, when the Lord hasn't called you to something, he's not going to equip you for it. And if he loves you, he's not going to allow it to happen.
Hmm.
What I don't want to say is that, like, well, what I do want to say is we are called to work, and we're called to work really hard.
Hmm.
That's something I also am coming to learn, and helping build Cubit. And it's a startup, but it feels a little bit more than a startup. But at the end of the day, we started in 2022, so we've been iterating along the way. We're very thankful and proud of the work that's been done. We've found a lot of favor, and it takes a lot of work. It is You have to be very disciplined to shut it off when it's time for family, and otherwise you'll work. nonstop, 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. Like it would not be hard for me to do that based on all the activities going on. And it's very reasonable to work hard, but working, effectively would be more important. Don't just, burn the midnight oil on, junk.
Yep. All right, I want to do one more question about work, and then I want to spend a little bit of time on our trend spotter because you
Okay.
have a very unique view into some of the most impactful trends impacting our society. So kind of the last question related to work is there's a rumor has it that you've been reading a book, Living Life Backwards, which I found out about this because I subscribe to the Cubit Capital newsletter, which all of our listeners should too. Very thoughtful newsletter. And so you read this book, Living Life Backwards by David Gibson, which draws on the wisdom of the book of Ecclesiastes and prompts the question, what is it that death teaches us how to truly live? Just what are your takeaways from that book? Advice kind of for us from that book.
I am someone who lives like a couple days, a couple weeks, a couple months into the future if I don't discipline myself to live in the here and now. And I want to do things with excellence. And when you coincide those two things, you can oftentimes be living in the idea of the future versus the reality of today. Not that big of a problem if you're by yourself. It becomes quite a big problem if you've got kids, a spouse, and you want to love and serve them well. And I would say that the biggest influence that book has had on my life is to be incredibly grateful and content for the times that we're just playing at the park. And I have zero urge to, get on my phone and respond to some emails. I think that's probably the biggest thing. Whereas before, it's, if I'm just thinking about the next year, 2 years, or 5 years, I'll just work constantly towards that and miss everything that's in front of me. And really, I've prayed for this. I prayed that the Lord would give me the contentment and the heart to just like fall in love with our reality today. We've got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, so it's like the highest highs and some pretty low lows in very quick succession. And I travel a lot. I travel most weeks for work, and it's hard. I can't wait to be back just to roll around and play with things but play with the kids, and so that's been a big shift. Whereas before, it felt more like, hey, I need to do this work so that then I can have time to play with them. But that's just not, it's not how it goes. Like we ultimately need to do both. We need to do both well. And so that is, that's been a lot of fun. And yeah.
Are you doing anything tactically to turn off work, I guess? Like when you come home, do you put your phone on do not disturb? I'm just curious.
Yeah, at times, if I remember to, I'll put it in a bowl by the front door, and I don't wear like an Apple Watch or anything like that. I've also given permission and asked my wife to hold me accountable, and so she's not shy if I pull out the phone at the table or something, and I'm very grateful for her loving me in that way. And so I would say if accountability is one of the best ways to achieve certain disciplines in life. And so for me, it was that conversation with my wife of saying, "Hey, I need your help here too," and she's been faithful to help me in that.
Great. And then last thing before we get into trends, you talk a lot about investing in founders who are both humble and confident. Sometimes on the face of it, those words feel like they're opposed to each other. Can you just talk about why you look for those two traits in particular and how they're not maybe opposed and actually complementary of each other?
Yeah, that's a good question. We're incentivized to invest in people who are both humble and confident because they need to attract incredible talent. And one of the most costly things for a business is high turnover in their talent. And so I find that if it is enjoyable to work for someone and you can look up to that person, you're much more likely to stay at that job and find an environment that you enjoy being in. On the contrary, if the individual at the top of the org chart is confident and prideful, or humble and whatever not being confident is, I don't know that word, it's probably going to be hard to like look up to them and follow them into the challenges that is in store for the business. And so for me, one element is like we're just incentivized because I think that's the best leader for a business. If you look at like the legends of the marketplace and at least American history, I wish I knew more world history better, and we could probably draw it out at times, past America. But let's go with Truett Cathy, right? Chick-fil-A, pretty good business, right? Like, not a public company, but it's pretty significant operation. It's done significant work, employed a lot of people. Truett Cathy is like the most humble and confident individual I think stories have told. And then if you go into just the investing part, like listen to things with Warren Buffett. Like what you experience is someone who is both very confident and very humble. And so we want people who have incredibly high ambition and very low ego. We want people who have very strong convictions and courage to follow those convictions, yet keep their ears open for new information to change course as soon as new information comes up. And that's where the humility part comes in, because like you need to run hard after what you're convicted about and what the data is showing. But as soon as there's new data available, you need to reassess and see if you need to change course. But someone who has a really big ego and closes off that new data pipeline, they're just kind of convinced that they're right and they need to do that. They're going to crash and burn. And so that's where the humble and confident piece comes into, is trying to invest in some amazing leaders that are going to influence and bless a lot of people.
Wow, that's really good. I think I'm going to go update my employee handbook in the process of being written to put that into our hiring guides. And I love what you said of just like high ambition and low ego, and then confident and also willing to listen when the data and wise counsel is prompting potentially a different direction. So that's good. All right, let's go into TrendSpotter. You recently told me that you think the rise of short form video is one of the most monumental, consequential, dangerous shifts in our society. Feel free to correct me if I'm misquoting you. So can you just unpack that? I was surprised, and I haven't heard anybody say that before. And so, tell me more about your thesis there.
Well, I'm not a doctor, not a psychologist, so I'll speak cautiously here. But I think, you know, this won't be too surprising to folks. The So let's go back 100 years, and then really any time prior to that. In order to uh, converse with someone, interact with someone, and do so with consistency, you would have needed to like hear them out, right? They talk, you listen, they stop, you respond, you engage, they listen. There's that, conversation. And in that engagement is where new ideas, new perspectives are formed, because no one individual is made identical to someone else, except for maybe identical twins, but I assume their like neuro networks are a little bit different. But like we agree, you and I agree on a lot of things in life, and I guarantee you there's about 101,000 things we disagree on, whether it's the flavor of something, the color of something, someone else's tone or activity. And so we have different perspectives, even if like the core principles in our life we agree on, we're going to have different perspectives on all kinds of other things. And the more we remove our action of engaging with one another, the more we just get consumed with our own perspective and ignore other people's perspective. And so I think short form videos are that, like, the epitome of reactionary interaction versus engaging interaction. So you scroll through or you see a little video, the beginning and the end of it's been cut off. Who knows, what's included in there. I think the lowest hanging fruit example here would be political videos. And it'd be an interesting study to see if, like how much of someone's viewpoint or perspective of someone else is made of what percentage of their total person and their, words publicly spoken. Like how many people have actually listened to all of the words spoken by someone else. Whereas before you tune into the radio, before TV, you tune into the radio and like you'd listen to all of it, until something went wrong and you couldn't listen to it. But now you rarely listen to the beginning and end. You rarely listen to the whole story. And so, yeah, I just think it's bad. It reduces engagement and causes division because people are just living within their own little individual perspective bubbles. And then on the like psychological standpoint, just the dopamine hit. It's instant gratification. It's not embracing and experiencing creation. It's very much like experiencing manipulated representation of creation.
Yeah, and maybe relatedly to that, you also told me that social media is like aspirin as AI is to like heroin, which is another heart stopper.
I think, so both of those say, well, let's use, let's see, aspirin, and let's use like morphine. I don't know what heroin's used for in the medical field, but I know morphine is. So like both of those things are tools, right?
Yeah.
But the abuse and misuse of those two tools have drastically different consequences, right? So it's like a hammer versus a sledgehammer, very, different consequences. And I think social media, thankfully people see it now for what it is. It
Yep.
does not connect you with your friends. It is just a horrible mirage of reality. And I also realize there is some good to it, but I do not think it's a net positive on society. And I I remain open on that though for hard data, but let's say for adolescents, I'm pretty convinced it's a net negative. AI is also an incredible tool, um, but instead of a dopamine hit like social media, it's got this more of it. It can channel human emotions, and pretty soon, if you use it a lot, you can talk to it like it's human, and that's pretty dangerous. That's especially for adolescent whose neural network and whole person is still being formed. It can replace the thought need for friends and family and people. I think it's an incredible tool and incredibly dangerous if used without discipline.
So as you think about your kids growing up, I mean, I guess we're still in the early days. The AI world has changed drastically in the past 10 days, and it's going to change, drastically in the next 10 years. Yeah. How are you just thinking about, limits of that, like when it comes to your kids?
Yeah,
Or TBD is a fair answer too.
no, I mean, I'm quite convinced we're low tech. Our kids don't have tablets. They don't get to use tablets unless we're on an airplane. My 3-year-old gets to watch a movie with me, but even then, it's with me. Like, we don't let him watch stuff by himself on the airplane. We watch it together, and we are emphatically not seeking education in elementary school that utilizes um, screens. I think there's an incredible opportunity to leverage AI and technology to improve learning outcomes. For me personally, whether it's just a poetic embrace or a data-driven embrace, I really want them to use pencil and paper and let their brain, experience it in that way. The ed tech data is out, and I think we've been shown that it doesn't improve learning outcomes just by itself. It can, but just integrating technology does not improve learning outcomes. Again, it's a tool, and if it's used with discipline and purpose, it can create value. But without that discipline and purpose, it's likely not going to create the value you expect it to. And so with AI, I mean, as you said, it's changing. It changes, by the day. So far, I've said, we're not going to have any humanoid robots in our home. I was at a dinner not too long ago, and I was the only person at the dinner who wasn't looking forward to having their first humanoid robot in the home. I just thought, wow, I must, I don't, I don't know why I'm the only person who thinks that. It seems pretty clear to me, but,
yeah, who else was at the dinner? I want to know. No, just kidding. Don't.
Yeah.
But you were at another dinner recently with a group called humanconnections.ai.
Yeah.
Co-hosted by the Harvard Human Flourishing Program, which sounds cool. And it brought together a select group of leaders to explore our central question: how we might build, AI systems that strengthen social relationships and advance human flourishing? So, great question. What's the answer?
Yeah. Uh, the answer is still being discerned. The early innings are showing that, the tool is really great, but we need to design it so that, kids aren't talking to hammers like they're a real person, and the hammer doesn't respond to them asking how their day was and trying to, be their psychologist and therapist as well. And so ultimately, like right now, AI is being designed. Well, I should say um, the chat inferences that the chat interfaces that we commonly use are designed to like keep you engaged, right? When you ask a question, it'll answer it, but oftentimes it'll ask another couple questions. Hey, do you want me to do this? Would you like me to do this? Would you, it's designed to engage you and use more use. And, it's a profit seeking entity, and they charge by the minute, if you will. And so for children, that's pretty dangerous, because the more you do that pretty quickly, the easiest way to get someone engaged is to tap into their emotion capacity, facility, and have them really interact, share their feelings, and so I think that's pretty dangerous. If we thought social media is creating unsocial, non-social teenagers, um, AI is going to wreak havoc on them. And all it is using it with discipline. Like, it's not, there is no like, hey, don't let them use it. If you want them to use it and learn from it, that's great for you. Just use it with discipline. Be mindful of how they're interacting with it. Like, if you give a 16-year-old the keys to your car, right? What do you say? Like,
Be
okay,
careful.
don't speed. Yeah, follow the law. Like,
Yeah.
don't do 90 miles an hour down the neighborhood street, right? Like, that will end in certain catastrophe. And so I don't know why it is, but as soon as someone hands their kid a phone or a tablet, it's like they, for some reason, they're acting as if the constraints and the boundaries are in the design of that tablet or phone, and it's not the case. And so, just as in any other area of life, like, practice discernment, wisdom, discipline, and let your kids interact with all kinds of stuff, but treat it just as you would something else that has consequences.
Okay. All right. We're going to move to our always on questions now. Looking back at your experience at work, is meaning found or created?
Is meaning found or created? Unpack that a little bit for me.
So if the goal is to have a job, we'll say meaningful work, not necessarily,
Okay.
we don't want to, happy is a bad word, but like the goal is to find meaningful work. And do you think meaningful work is found or created?
I don't think it matters on that part. I think what matters is knowing what you believe to be meaningful. Right? I think most people haven't dug in to actually reflect on what they believe to be meaningful. Otherwise, both works. You could, if the job exists, go do it. If it doesn't, create it. But figuring out for yourself what's meaningful and enjoyable, that's how you're going to do great work, is really like figuring out what you want to hang your hat on. Anyways.
Okay. And last thing, what's one thing you want our listeners thinking about as they finish their commute home or spend a moment journaling over the weekend? We covered a lot of ground, and which I love. And so, yeah, what's one thing that you want us recovering workaholics to be thinking about from our conversation today, or just in general? Maybe we didn't even cover it.
I'd encourage the listener to pause and reflect on how they've been wired, how they've been created, regardless of their faith or no faith, like what makes them them, and what are activities in life that bring them to the fullness expression, like the fullest expression of themselves, and pursue that. I don't the saying, what's the saying? Go, like, you won't work a day in your life if you do what you love, or whatever.
Yeah.
Is that something? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's, that's fine. But the element of it is like, do what you believe is worth doing, and really dig in there and match it up with how you've been wired to enjoy it fully. Because the elements that come, the outcome, if that is the goal, you will be left wanting. If the outcome is just what you're doing it for, then you're going to be left wanting, in my opinion. So find things you enjoy doing, and do them with excellence and grit and integrity.
It's a good word. All right. Well, thank you, Philip. We appreciate you joining. Thank you for your friendship, your business partnership, and for your humility and vulnerability and coming on to share your stories. So we appreciate you joining us. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Thank you to everyone.
Awesome. Okay. Adam left. There we go. We'll leave. How do we stop recording? I guess I can't.